Welcome to Speakers Talking About Speaking. This time I am on a Zoom call internationally to the United States of America with one of my favorite speakers and a new friend of mine who I met at the NSA conference, which in July 2017, which is the biggest speakers conference in the world. I knew of this speaker, who I'll introduce in just a moment, but I bumped into him in the coffee queue and I thought, I've got to get this guy's number and I wonder if he'll let me interview him too. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on Zoom from the States, Coach Jim Johnson, everybody. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Lee. Nice to see you.
You can hear me well. You're okay with that? That's great.
I am, yep.
Jim has an amazing story, and not only is he a coach of high school, is it high school, Jim? Yeah, high school basketball.
High school, correct. Yep.
Which, as you know, in the States is a massive thing. You know, lots of people come to the games, but something happened to Jim that went viral on YouTube, which has affected him and has made his speaking career blossom. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about that viral video.
Sure. Well, I was going along and I ended up being a coach for 35 years, 33 of them at the high school level. And I was trying to figure out, ironically, the first job I ever had as a varsity coach, which is the head coach at the high school, I actually got fired. So it was a very humbling experience.
Oh, gosh.
But I picked myself up and then I started to have more success. But as we started to have more winning seasons, I had a real obstacle in my life. We're measured in coaching a lot by how we do in the postseason. So interesting enough is that one of our issues is we'd have winning season, but then we'd lose in our postseason tournament. Well, interesting, in 2003, a young man entered our program and he had autism. His name was Jason McElwain, and the world now knows him as J-Mac. And J-Mac wasn't really a very good player, but he had a huge heart. And he was autistic and learning disabled, but that didn't stop him from having a big dream. And his dream was wanted to play in a varsity basketball game. Well, he tried out for our team for 3 consecutive years, did not make it, but served as our team manager all 3 years. When he came out his senior year, I said, J-Mac, unfortunately, you're still not quite good enough to make the team, but I want to give you a gift this year. And the gift is for senior night, our final home game, I'm going to give you a uniform, hopefully get you in the game. Well, I kid people that periodically he was excited about that uniform. And I define periodically as about every other day. He was really pumped up. Well, I wrote a book about it called The Coach and a Miracle because we actually had a lot of issues. We were supposed to have a very good team, but we had a lot of internal strife that I'm not going to get into. But J-Mac was our rock through a real challenging early part of the season. Well, we got it straightened out, and we were having a lot of success coming into our final home game, senior night. On senior night, now Jason, instead of in his white shirt and black tie, he's now donning number 52. And to see him embrace his parents in uniform is a memory I'll always cherish. Yeah. Well, after 3 quarters of the game, I got everybody in but Jason. So with just over 4 minutes to go, I decided the time was right. I pointed to him. He nearly ran on the court. He was so excited. And then he was entering his first game. And this macho coach, me, was hit by a blind side. What I didn't know was how well the student body was going to receive him. They gave him a standing ovation. What I didn't know, and Jason, one of our parents had made these placards of Jason's face, and they actually showed him when he entered the game. This macho guy that was wouldn't cry at a basketball game, right, sat down and tears started to roll down my face. Well, Jason's in his first game now. He touches the ball for the first time. He gets it in the right corner. He lets a 3-pointer go. The crowd stands in anticipation. It misses by like 6 feet. And I had to pray to God hard. Please, God, please help him get 1 basket. Well, the second possession, we actually had a much shorter shot. And this time we had a little drama because it hit the backboard, hit the rim, and fell off. I'm thinking, all right, God's starting to glisten. And then our third possession, Jason shot another 3 from the right wing, and this time it went in. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a 3-pointer. It can't get better than this, right? Well, wrong. As I kid people, Jason's boyhood idol was the Laker great Kobe Bryant. And he turned into Kobe Bryant for like the last 3 minutes of the game, and he just started making shot after shot. And the 2 things I'll never forget was with a minute to go, I'm still sitting on the bench, amazed at what I'm watching, of course, watching it through my teardrops. And I get a tap on my shoulder. I look behind me. It's Jason's mother, and she's bawling her eyes out. She gives me a big embrace and whispers in my ear,
Wow.
"Coach, this is the best gift you could ever given me." And of course, I was cried harder. I was so touched. And then this is actually how the game ended. With about 10 seconds to go, our opponent, Spencerport, I want to give kudos to their coach and their players. They were great sports that night. They score. And our player that takes it out of bounds, instead of throwing it to our point guard, he throws it to J-Mac. So there's about 10 seconds to go. And in my talks, I have the crowd talk, count it down. And all of a sudden, he gets to about 3 seconds. And I'm thinking he's going to go in and just shoot a layup. No, he pulls up like 2 feet behind the arc, almost an NBA three. I'm thinking, Jason, don't shoot for that. It's way too far. He lets go this rainbow and swish. And I look over, our student body runs on the floor. Our players run on the floor. And the other thing I'll never forget is Jason's mother. She was very little, about 5'2". I see her bobbing and weaving through the mass of people to get the J-Mac. And the last thing to close is our players put him up on their shoulders. And at this point, I have no idea how many points he has. And our public address announcer comes on and says, "The leading scorer for the Greece Athenian Trojans tonight, J-Mac with 20 points." And of course, my math brain, I'm thinking if he'd have played the whole game, he'd have scored 160 because he scored 20 in 4 minutes. Interesting, I'll just close with in my heart, I felt like I did it for the right reasons. I didn't really do it for any media attention. I called the local newspaper because we call in our games. They didn't make much of a deal. And I thought that's where it was going to end. Well, the interesting thing is Jason's speech pathologist came to the game. It was the first game he'd ever come to. He was so touched. He called one of the local TV stations the next day at school, and they borrowed the tape. And when they showed it, it started gaining momentum. And within 4 or 5 days, all of a sudden, it became a global story. It became a YouTube sensation. ESPN did a really neat 5-minute documentary that has well over 1 million hits on it. And which thrust me into the speaking world, unbeknownst. Although I enjoyed speaking, I'd only done it in the basketball world. Then I became a motivational leadership speaker that I've been doing for over a decade, but just full-time, just over a year, because I stayed on and coached and taught as well. So I'm in a new journey, which I enjoy immensely. And so I'm now a full-time speaker because I retired from coaching in 2016.
Fantastic. So,
and actually, when I add one last thing, Lee, I mentioned my obstacle about never winning our championship. Ironically, Jason's senior year, 3 weeks later, we won our first Section 5 championship. Wow. And then Jason came back and helped me my last 9 years, and we ended up winning 6 of them. So once I broke down that 4-minute mile barrier, things really started to improve. So.
Wow. So once you'd won the championship, it just started to happen, and J-Mac was around helping you.
He was. Wow. He's been still my inspiration to
That's
this
fantastic.
day.
So I'll ask you about your speaking journey in just a moment. But,
sure.
I mean, let me ask you a little bit about. So is J-Mac, is he kind of famous in your town? Does he work locally now? People see him and still know him?
Yeah, he's definitely has some fame. And interesting is that he got a growth spurt after high school. He was about 5'9", 120 in that game, and now he's about 6'1", 170. So he's really gotten a lot bigger. He's actually, ironically, we always talked a lot about our goals, and he was a runner in high school, and he was just okay. But he's actually gotten back into running, and I've encouraged him, and he's actually run 11 marathons, I think, and he's run the Boston Marathon 3 times. So he's actually broke 3 hours in the Boston Marathon. So he's actually become a pretty darn good runner as well.
Gosh, yeah, that's pretty good for a tall runner too. That's a good time, right?
Yeah. So he's doing well. He works at a local grocery store in our town, and I still see him a lot. So we're very close. He's like a second son to me. So.
That's amazing. And so were you filming it that day, or was it a parent that was filming it? How did that happen?
Actually, it was a student. That year, a lot of years I was able to get a parent to do it, but that year we struggled. And so I was actually, I went to one of my colleagues, and they were doing it as kind of give back.
Yeah.
It was only about the fourth game because we had done a semester break where I had to get a new student. And the ironic thing is he ended up videoing and catching the essence of it by, scanning the crowd as well. And he became an instant celebrity as far as a video or by accident. So.
And I think when a video is popular and viral, because when you actually type in a few things to find it on YouTube, there's actually several now, isn't there? So people have taken the video and re-uploaded it. So to count the views now, I mean, it's several million now, I guess, with all the different versions of it, isn't there?
Right.
It's quite, and I'll make sure there's a link, or I might be able to actually put the video on the end of this so people can see it in full. But so there you are. So you're high school basketball coach for all that time,
right.
With not much success, and then a little bit of success towards the end. And then all of a sudden you're a speaker. So did people start asking you to do talks, or did you decide this is what I want to do as my second career?
Well, it was more that because the story became so popular, people started reaching out, and interesting. Autism's kind of a unique situation in the fact that it's become even more prevalent, and there's some various reasons for that. So I think people. To me, it was a gift from God because I think it gave a lot of people hope, with disabilities and certainly specifically autism. So people started reaching out to me, and they want to be inspired by the story. So early on, I basically just came in and shared the story. And then as I got better as a speaker, I realized, not only do I have a really neat story to share with people, but I can give them some tangible keys through all the things I've learned from my coaching and leadership career. So I do two talks. I do an inspirational keynote where I talk about the JMax story and then 6 keys to making your dreams come true. And then I do another leadership keynote where, depending on the client, sometimes I still want to hear the JMax story, but then I talk about 7 essential keys to being an outstanding leader. And then I've done some workshops. I've done some goal setting because I've done that a lot with my students and kids and my players. So I do that. And I speak to a lot of different, businesses and schools and associations. And I've almost spoken probably every kind of possible situation. But it's really been a neat journey. And how I really got more involved in it is when I started to speak, I started to really like it. And ironically, I was speaking at an event in Chicago about a year after the JMAC game, and this person came to me after my talk. He says, "Coach, you got a lot of potential as a speaker." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he says, "You should join the National Speakers Association." And this is my ignorance. I was getting into speaking like I knew nothing about the industry. And I looked at him and I said, "What's that?" And he shared it with me. And it was a great bit of advice because I ended up joining. I've been a member now for 9 years. I met my manager, and I met, extraordinary people like yourself. And I've learned so much about the speaking, and, I've got some very good friends that are speakers now. So that was a great bit of advice that helped me immensely in my speaking career.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned, let me just unpick a few things, because whoever's watching this, on YouTube and on the pod or listening on the podcast, they will get, there'll be speakers at different levels. And so I want to dissect a little bit of what you said. Now, you said something there which is really important, and I think it's one of the key things as speakers. You said, I have my story and I tell my story, but then I give takeaway keys for the audience to use. How did do you think sometimes speakers forget to do that? And how did you get to those keys yourself? And how did you know you needed them?
I definitely think, some people forget to, whether you call it takeaways or challenges, but you got to give the audience something that they can take away and implement into their life. Otherwise, it's nice to be inspired and motivated, whatever you want to call it. But if you don't give them some tools to actually implement it in their life and make changes in their life, they're going to stay the same. So as I said, I guess it was just from my coaching. And then as I learned more about speaking, and I started to study different speakers, what was effective, what isn't. And, that's really something I share when people say, how did you become pretty successful as a basketball coach? Really it's because I studied coaching and leadership, and I got to a point where I got really good at it. it. And that's the thing that I've learned so much about speaking, platform skills, marketing skills, how to work with a business team, because I have a little team that I work with. How to get involved with social media. I mean, I laugh, Lee. I mean, social media is huge in speaking. I didn't want any part of it. And I realized that, you know what, if I'm going to be in this game, this is really important. So I laugh at myself, because if you said to me, even 6-7 years ago, Coach, you're going to be on social media every day, I would have said, you're out of your mind. But of course, I'm on social media every day. So,
of course, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? So yeah, I will do your contact details at the end so people can follow you on Twitter and
sure.
Facebook and stuff, that kind of stuff. So yeah, so the takeaways are key, aren't they? Because I've even heard from people who've got an amazing story, but then they kind of stop their talk. And I've seen quite a few of these. And me as an audience member rather than a speaker, I tend to go in my head, oh, okay, that was nice.
Right.
Whereas I think people really pay us, don't they? Because you're going to give them something practical that they can do when they leave that auditorium. That's the key. So have you ever had anybody that's contacted you afterwards and said, look, that thing really changed my work or my life? Have you had that kind of feedback to help you to know what to focus in on?
Yeah, I definitely have. When I talk about different things, I've had people contact me. Like one of the keys I talk about is understanding your mission in life. Why. What's your purpose? And a lot of people, they've heard of that, but a lot of people, I mean, I'm amazed. When I travel and ask people how many have a personal mission statement written down, it's very, very few. And even one of my other keys in my inspirational talk is how to be an effective goal setter. And, I mean, we've all heard about goal setting, but let's be frank with it. How many people are actually practicing? So I give them some tangible tools, some challenges right away. Like I say, okay, I want you to start tomorrow. I'll give you tonight to think it over. I want you to write down your 3 most important goals. Because I'll ask the audience, how many people are writing their goals down? And it's a very small percentage. Yeah. And yet, we've all heard of goals. We all know it's, we should be more zeroed in on what's most important to us in all our phases of our life. So, so, I mean, not necessarily giving things that are completely new to anybody, but it's, really get people to stimulate their thinking and stimulate them to take action on things.
Yeah. I guess there's nothing new under the sun, right? We all teach similar stuff, but we have our own way of doing it because most stuff is thousands of years old. That's the reality, isn't it?
Right.
Now we talked last time we spoke. We talked in the States. I mean, people will listen to this from all over. I'll put this out in the UK, but also there'll be people. I'll put it out on the NSA stuff. The UK market is obviously very different from the US. And you mentioned that you actually have a management team now. So you have people that are they marketing or are they diary management? What is it that they do? Because that's a lot rarer in the UK. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, I have a small team of people. I'll give you my illustration. My manager, and she works with me. She helps with she has a lot of hats. She helps with marketing. We do a monthly newsletter that she edits and reaches out to clients. She does all the contract work, all the itinerary. I mean, she has a lot of things she does. We have a lady that helps with my social media that I work with every month. She also works with the newsletter. She does social media as well as I do. I mean, I'm involved with that as well. I have a web person that's on our team. So if we want to add a video or that kind of thing, or we are always trying to upgrade our website. So I think that's an error that speakers make is they they put one website up and it becomes obsolete. You got a picture from 20 years ago. Hey, that's not what you look like anymore.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of people, quite a lot of event planners have booked people and thought, hey, who sent your older brother? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. So, then I have a person that I actually just hired. This is another idea. I went to a local college and I just hired 2 interns to help me with video work because video is very big. I have a person that I talk to each week that I write out. I do a journal on a blog each week, and then he puts it on the website for me. So, I'm able to, try to stay to my strengths. And then, the other thing I can really say in any industry, but speaking, is you always got to keep striving to get better. Like the next month, I'm going to meet with a speaker coach, when we're going to assess my brand, we're going to assess my platform skills. I think it's just really important that you continue to grow. So
that's great to hear. Yeah, every day's a school day, as I like to tell people, that you've got
absolutely
to start learning, and I love that learning. And sometimes I have to, I have to stop myself learning and get on with my work sometimes, because I love, I'll follow links on Twitter, I'll be reading articles and stuff, and I think that's part of it. We've got to be learners, right? We've got to be learners.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So if I was to ask you, could you give a couple of tips? So could you give a couple of tips for platform skills for maybe a new speaker, and maybe a couple of tips for running a speaking business and what's worked for you? Anything practical there, Jim?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the platform skills. Number one is that I really believe you should, early on, it's easy for me to say hire a coach, but coaches can be very expensive. So I think early on, it's a matter of first of all, writing your speech out. You shouldn't memorize your speech, but you should be clear on what you're trying to do. Number two, you should constantly practice it. I think that's one thing. And even veteran speakers, I always practice my talk before I go out. I mean, you don't ever take that for granted. Practice it a number of times. Thirdly, is getting it videoed and get it assessed by you. And hopefully, as you grow as a speaker, you can have other people look at it and really improve that, so that you're really becoming fluent as a speaker. And sometimes you don't even know. I early on, I know I said things like "okay" too much. Now I'm very good at that. But actually, a few years ago, I had somebody come out and said, "You know what? You say so too much." And so I really concentrated on. Because, as a speaker, you get to a point where you feel like you're saying good things and you're not using your ahs and okays, but there might be still annoying habits you're doing. Sometimes you don't even realize.
I see.
The same with, understanding how to emphasize a point, where you might want to approach the audience, or change your volume, or a pause is a really powerful thing to use. And I think early beginning speakers don't want to pause. They want to just keep talking. And what you got to do is give the audience, after you make a powerful point, time to let it sink into them. So, those are a lot of things that I've learned and I'm continuing to learn. Then from the business standpoint is that it is nice if you can get, as you get better, is to try to attract a team and so that you can work to your strengths and delegate things that aren't as strong. But you really got to have, number one thing that sometimes we forget from the business, you got to be great on the platform. If you're not, that'll hurt you. But as you become more effective on the platform, then you have to consistently get in front of or get your name out there. And so to do that, number one is get video of you speaking on your website, put it on YouTube, do things like I do a whole video series that I send out. I do a weekly blog, so I'm sharing information of things, trying to help people. I do a monthly newsletter, so I've gotten a following. And then I truly believe, we can all say, but I think you do have to get some involved in, depending on who you talk to, how involved, but you got to be consistent with social media. You got to have a presence out there. You got to have a following. And then the huge thing is to establish a following is you have to consistently think of how can I add value to my followers? Whether it's to send one of your videos, I do a weekly book recommendation. I'm a big reader, so I do that on my social media every single week. But you got to do what your strengths. You got to share that and make sure that you get a following. So when people know that you're a speaker, or maybe you come out with a book or another product, people got to be aware of that. But the only time you come out publicly is when you're trying to sell something. You're going to really struggle. You got to build that relationship first.
Sure. That's some great tips there. Some fantastic. So just on a practical level, do you diary these things in? So do you write your blog on a Wednesday morning, and do you do your newsletter on a Friday afternoon? You know, because sometimes I find, you know, that the week kind of runs away with me, and then I think, oh, I didn't do that blog I was meant to do. You know, how do you make sure that happens?
Well, we do the newsletter once a month, and we put it on, with my manager, my social media director, the three of us. I write the initial content, and then they revise it. And then my son is a brilliant writer himself, so we send it to him. So we have a little bit of checks and balances. But we have a date that, we're going to send the newsletter out it's usually the third Thursday. And then from the blog, sometimes it changes because of schedules, but for the most part, I talk to my blog person on Monday night. So I usually write my blog on the weekend, talk to him Monday nights, and it usually goes out Wednesday or Thursday. So,
nice.
And again, I think that is a key, is being consistent with your social media. If not, people will forget about you.
Yeah, and then the key is also what you're learning there is we not have a management team, but I have a web guy. I have other people around. They're not maybe a specific team like you, but what you're saying is that actually you want to do the content, and then you farm out the practicalities of that. Because sometimes when you write a blog, you've written it and you think, oh, I've got to format it. I've got to find a photograph for it. I've got to put it on my blog. Then I've got to put it on my Twitter, my Facebook page. And before, and that's the kind of stuff where you go, oh, I'd rather not do it,
Right. And that's the thing, as you grow as a speaker, what you try to figure out, obviously you got to have a revenue stream, because, when you delegate to other people, you got to pay them. So, but that's something I've been able to work out, is that, what I try to stay in my strengths, although I do try to always learn and enhance what I'm doing. Yeah. But there's people that are, I'm never going to get great in my website. I know what I want on my website, but I'd rather delegate that out to somebody that's their job. They love that. That's not my passion. I know it's important as a speaker to have a great website, but I don't want to have to know all the ins and outs to do it. So,
no, that's right. And websites are never finished, right? They're never finished.
Oh, so for sure.
You just got to keep rolling with it. That's been fantastic. Loads of information there for experienced and for brand new speakers, Jim. It's fantastic. Just tell everybody where can they follow you on Twitter? How do they get a hold of you and follow you?
Yeah, probably the best is I've got all my social media information on my website, which is CoachJimJohnson.com. That way I wouldn't forget it. And on that, there's the JMAC video that we had talked about. There's some videos of me speaking. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter, my weekly blog. Those are all free, complimentary. And certainly, one of my dreams is to become a global speaker. I've only, to this point, spoken the U.S. and Canada. So hoping someday to come over and visit you, Lee, and spark the UK.
We have chatted about it, Jim. We're hoping it might happen, eh? We're hoping it might happen. So that'd be fantastic. I'd love to host you here in the UK. And I know there'll be loads of businesses and lots of professional speakers that'd love to hear your message. It was one of the most inspirational YouTube videos of all time. And it was fantastic, not only because it was about young people, but it was about disability. It was encouraging. It was just fantastic. And so I'm pleased that I've met you in real life, Jim. It's been a real pleasure. So we'll maybe have a chat a little bit after this, but we'll end it now. And people can get a hold of you at CoachJimJohnson.com. So thank you, Jim.
Right. My pleasure. It's great to talk to you, Lee.
Thank you.
What we all want in life is a shot. But what we do with it, that's the story we all want to tell.
I've coached for 25 years and I've never experienced that, the emotional high of what happened.
What happened for Jason McElwain, or J-Mac as his friends call him, is about more than a shot. Diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, now identified as highly functioning, he's never considered himself different or separate, especially when it comes to sports.
Sports has always been, how could I say, his equalizer. He's just like any of the other kids out there.
It's not really a big deal at all. I'm just normal like other people. That's the way I am.
At 5'6", J-Mac didn't make the junior varsity basketball team at his high school, Greece Athena, near Rochester, New York. Instead, he became team manager, a role he now has for the varsity as a senior. In the last 3 years, in his white shirt and black tie, he's missed only one game.
Go to practice, I set up the clock and get the water in games and be enthusiastic.
As this season was wrapping up, Coach Johnson approached Jason with an idea about the Trojans' final home game of the season.
I said, I'm really going to look to try to get you in the game, but remember, I can't promise you that. And he goes, okay, Coach.
February 15th, Greece Athena against Spencerport, senior night. With word out that Jason might play, the student section printed signs of J-Mac's face, just in case. And with 4:19 left in the game, with the Trojans up by 20, Coach called down to the end of the bench for number 52.
I just kind of turned and pointed at him, and he almost ran right on the court. He was so excited.
Hey, Jay, you got to check in. So he hits the buzzer, and he doesn't go anywhere. It's like, now you go on the court. He was so caught up in the moment.
He came into the game, they all stood up and they put the signs, the pictures of him up, and I got really emotional. And I sat down and started to cry.
With 3:46 left, Jason got the ball.
When he missed that first three, I was like, oh, and then it airball, and I was like, man, I really just want to see him score one time.
I put my head in my hands, like, dear God, please, let's just get him a basket.
Then, with 3:12 left, another chance.
That third trip down the court, magic.
As soon as I started hitting my first shot, I just kept shooting, and I was just hot as a pistol.
Shot after shot after shot kept going in.
The basket was like this big, huge bucket, and I was shooting them like they were free throws. It was just a big, huge bucket that's like huge.
And I was like, oh my God, is this really happening? He has more points than me, so he's got bragging rights over me.
He was unstoppable for that moment in time. He was unstoppable.
He comes down the court right at the end with like 3 seconds left, and he hits this one that's, probably like an NBA three. As soon as the gun ended, they stormed the court, I couldn't, I just couldn't dream anything like that.
It felt like we won a championship. Everyone was just so happy for me.
In that 4 minutes 19 seconds, Jason was 7 for 13, 6 of 10 from three-point range, 20 points in all. In his first and only varsity basketball game, J-Mac was the high scorer.
Truly the most incredible moment I've ever had in coaching. I was so touched, and it was just so special to me that a young man, his dream came true, and that I could help that. It was awesome.
What we all want in life is a shot. J-Mac took his, and now it's a story we can all tell.